The Protection Paladin in the Mythic Dungeon setting has really been shining this season, and that's no secret. At the time of recording this video, the top tank on live servers is actually a Protection Paladin. Though, with the upcoming 10.0.7 patch, the Paladin class is seeing a quite significant rework. While these changes are mostly directed at the other two specs, Protection Paladin will be affected. So today in this video, I want to walk through the changes Paladins are going to be seeing next patch, cross-compare the current trees to the new tree, and just generally nerd out about these changes. I do want to lead with a small disclaimer though. When I look at these trees, I'm typically going to be approaching it from a Mythic plus mindset. I won't really refer to anything raid related. Also, I took this season off from playing Protection Paladin, though I did spend a lot of time testing it on the Dragonflight beta, as well as pushing keys in both Shadowlands and Battle for Azeroth alike, so I feel pretty comfortable talking about the class, despite being on a small hiatus. Without further ado, let's dive in. Let's start with the class tree and then work our way down. The main thing we are looking out for is how these changes will affect the current build and playstyle. Like normal, Protection Paladins will start with Diva Aura and Lay on Hands, as locked-in talents that just can't be changed. We're seeing that Cleanse Toxins, Turn Evil, and Obduracy have now found a new home in the second row of the tree. And we're also going to see that Greater Judgment talent being moved up and Fist of Justice swapping sides, and then the removal of Seal of the Templar. Well, I should say that it hasn't been removed, but instead baked into Crusader Aura, which I applaud. These changes mean that we're going to have 3 additional point nodes in the first part of the tree, allowing for more changes in current and potential builds while not really hurting the general pathing and progression throughout the tree later on. When it comes to building out the tree, there are things that I want to keep in mind when it comes to pathing. We typically want to opt in to CC, a kick, and we want to make sure that we're getting Avenging Wrath in the second tier of the tree. For CC, we're going to want to grab Blinding Light. Then we're going to want to grab our movement node with Divine Steed and Cavalier, and then this will give us access to Avenging Wrath once we unlock the second tier. Then we can spend points on Hammer of Wrath, Greater Judgment, and Rebuke. We've only spent 7 points so far, so we want to spend this wherever we might need it. If you need a Dispel for a dungeon like Algathar Academy, we can grab Cleanse Toxins. If you want to be able to cast Hammer of Justice more often, we can spend a point into Fist of Justice, or we can also stick a point into Obduracy for free secondary stats. The only node that I would really steer clear from would be Turn Evil. There aren't many times in the current patch that this ability can be utilized besides maybe Halls of Valor to CC the mobs on the mini-bosses before Odin, or maybe in like PvP. The layout of the second tree hasn't changed much, but we're definitely seeing some talent changes. Judgment of Light, which on live servers at the time is currently between Holy Aegis and Afterimage on the left-hand side of the tree, has been moved into the third tier. That node that was left empty was shifted over and replaced with a new talent called Sanctified Plates. This will increase our armor, stamina, and reduce the damage taken of AoE attacks by 10%. This is great because a lot of tanks get tertiary bonuses from their trees like Leech or Avoidance, so I'm glad that the Paladin is finally getting some of that love. This seems like more of a protection talent choice, but all 3 specs will have access to it. Most of the major changes in this section of the tree are happening on the right-hand side. Justification is a new talent that was added with the same icon as the old Hollowed Ground, but instead of increasing concentration damage, we're going to have a 10% increase on Judgment's damage. Another really cool talent that was added was a kick bonus, and I adore these talents because I like when the game incentivizes players to use their kick and successfully interrupt. Classes like Demon Hunter and Death Knight have had resource bonuses from successfully interrupting in the past, so for Paladins, we're now going to be able to cast an extra Crusader Strike at the enemy. For Protection Paladins though, we can assume that this is instead going to cast an extra Blessed Hammer or Hammer of the Righteous. Oddly enough, there is a new talent, Lightforged Blessing, that causes Divine Storm to heal allies. We're going to assume that this is going to be updated for the Protection of the Holy Paladin tree in some way. If there are any comments from Blizzard on this, let me know because I couldn't find anything, but I'm going to make the assumption that this will probably be Shield of the Righteous. The last talent that was added is Crusader's Reprieve, which increases your auto attack range and Crusader Strike range by 3 yards, and whenever you Crusader Strike, you heal for 2% of your maximum health. This seems a little bit odd since Crusader Strike will be replaced typically by Blessed Hammer in the Spec tree, but nonetheless, whenever we would cast that spell, we would heal for our max health. When it comes to pathing though, we have 12 points to spend here to unlock the next tier. I personally would think that grabbing our major cooldown Avenging Wrath accompanied with Sanctified Plates is pretty much a must. Also, with how great Ardent Defender and Final Stand are in the Spec tree, we're probably going to want to pick up Unbreakable Spirit. I would imagine grabbing Crusader's Reprieve would be pretty important, and currently the best way to get there is through Blessing of Protection, since Lightforge Blessing is currently bugged. Judgment damage makes up the majority of the Paladin's profile as well, so I think we're also going to want to grab Justification. And now with just 6 points left, we're going to want to grab Blessing of Sacrifice and the improved node. We can then backtrack a little bit and place 2 points into Holy Aegis, which will give us 4% more armor, and of course that's accompanied with Critical Strike. Now at this point, it feels like the last few nodes can really be spent wherever. There are some great nodes for more CC or extra utility or just stats in general. On live servers, Fist of Justice is a really popular choice, but the pathing is slightly more linear. But with 10.0.7, we're going to be able to spend these 2 points here and give us cooldown reduction on Hammer of Justice, but we might see these points put elsewhere once the patch goes live. Moving into the last tier of the trees, where we're going to see most of the major changes that happened. Looking at the center of the tree, we can see that most of this has been reworked, and we're now going to see Divine Toll. Along with this, we are no longer going to have to play through Divine Purpose, and we can opt to go around. Speaking of which, Holy Avenger was actually removed from the tree entirely. Seal of Might and Seal of Alacrity were both moved up, allowing for movement around Divine Purpose, if desired. Notably, Strength of Conviction and Fate's Armor, originally in the Spec tree, are now both in the class tree, and Faith Armors specifically was buffed. And when it comes to talent selection, I think some of the center talents are going to be just a must. It was common to see Divine Toll being played from the Spec tree and Divine Purpose along with the seals. They were all extremely popular. So it's going to cost us 7 of our 11 points to pick up all of these center nodes. The Dusk and Dawn talent choices in the lower left also have been popular among the Paladin players, so we can definitely spend the 2 points here to maintain those buffs. But we are actually going to see a new choice node after Dusk and Dawn talent option. Similar to before, we can still play Seal of Order, but there's a new talent called Fading Light. This will actually change the Blessing of Dusk buff to now cause holy power generating abilities to also grant an absorb shield for 20% of the damage or healing they dealt. It's hard to say how strong this is actually going to be, and it's something I'm interested in testing, but with the ever increasing haste that players are gaining from item level, Seal of Order is looking less valuable when considering the improved buff for maintaining Dusk. Without truly being able to test Fading Light currently, I think I'm just going to sink the point into Seal of Order and move on. With 2 points remaining, we can sync these into a few different talents that we've seen players running on live servers. Notably, we can look at Judgment of Light or Incandescence as popular choices, which would leave us with a tree that looks like this. There are some interesting choices like Fate's Armor that was buffed and no longer competes with the third tier in the Spec tree. Also, like I mentioned before, Lightforge Blessing currently reads Divine Storm, but I think if this is adjusted for Protection Paladins, we might see this be a very popular choice for Mythic Plus, but honestly, only time will tell. Overall, I think the adjustments for the class tree are pretty great regarding the Protection Paladin specifically, though I do think that the 10.0 Paladin tree was fine the way it was. It seems like a lot of these changes were actually to address the issues and friction that the Retribution and Holy Specs were experiencing. One thing that I just really like though about this redesign is the interrupt incentive, and of course seeing Divine Toll moved from the Spec tree into the class tree. That was a lot to digest, but let's take a look over at the Spec tree. We're first going to start with the first tier of the tree, and this is going to be quite brief. The only major change that we're actually seeing is the swapped position of the Holy Shield and the choice node between Blessed Hammer and Hammer of the Righteous. That means that the pathing through the start of the tree is going to be pretty much identical. Transitioning into the second tier of the tree though, we're going to notice that a few of the 2 choice nodes have actually swapped, but this really shouldn't affect our talent progression since they weren't really popular choices in Mythic Plus anyways. The only other major changes that are happening are on the right side of the talent tree. We can see a new talent here called Seal of Charity, which will cause the Paladin to heal for 50% of the Word of Glory healing when it's casted on someone other than yourself. This can be incredibly potent with the Hand of the Protector talent, which notably was moved down and replaced the Crusader's Judgment talent, which took the place of Uther's Council talent, which in turn took place in the third tier of the tree now. When it comes to second tier progression, let's quickly walk through what we might see for Mythic Plus. More than likely, it's going to be very similar to what people are currently playing on live servers, with a few possible changes. Per usual, I think we're going to grab Bulwark and then Avenging Wrath choice node. I've seen both choices getting played, but let's just grab Might for the sake of the argument. Then of course, we're going to grab Guardian of Ancient Kings. That leaves us with 7 points, which we will most likely put into Tears Enforcer and Bastion of Light. Notably, Relentless Inquisitor is also a popular choice for maintaining a solid haste buff. Now looking at the right side of the tree, we can grab Strengthen the Adversary and Crusader's Judgment. Lastly, the Seal of Reprisal was moved from the class tree into the Spec tree. This has potential since it was buffed significantly, and it has potential theoretically with Fading Light Choice Node with the Dusk and Dawn buff. Let's sink our last point here for now, but will probably be an easy point drop if you wanted to grab another ability later on. This will now open up the last tier of the tree, which we're going to see the most amount of significant changes. Like we talked about in the class tree, Divine Toll will no longer reside here, which should open up a few points. Resolute Defender and Uther's Counsel now resides down here, which I personally think makes way more sense. Uther's Counsel originally felt way too far out of the way despite it pairing extremely well with Final Stand. Resolute Defender now resides a little closer to Righteous Protector, which encompasses more of a cooldown reduction build. A new talent we are also seeing is Inmost Light, which significantly buffs Eye of Tears damage and reduces its cooldown, further bolstering the Paladin's defensive cooldown profile. And then the last change that we're seeing is now Sanctified Wrath in the Spec tree instead of being in the class tree. This notably was a popular choice on live servers. Overall, the pathing through this tier seems much more diverse, which is a net gain. The largest complaint across the board, which just comes down to a lot of trees, is that various classes normally end up being pretty shit when it comes to pathing, but I think these changes are just really solid. Regarding this tree specifically, I think first and foremost we're going to see Soaring Shield being taken. Accompanying this, I think Eye of Tear will be taken regularly. Sanctified Wrath, Resolute Defender, and Righteous Protector will also probably be taken. With 4 points left, I would imagine that Paladin players would want to hit Final Stand and Bulwark of Righteous Fury per usual. In order to get there though, we would have to progress through Inmost Light, which I wouldn't really complain about. It's basically free damage and more uptime on a 25% damage reduction. Typically, most players sink 1 point into Gift of the Golden Valkyr since the first point gives access to that free Guardian proc. Regarding these changes, we aren't seeing as much as the class tree outside of Seal of Appraisal and Inmost Light, though the defensive profile of the Protection Paladin has really been bolstered at this point. The change in positioning in Crusader's Judgment feels much better, and despite not running Uther's Counsel, it makes much more sense now, and who knows, there might be value in the further reduction of Divine Shield for more use of Final Stand. Well, that pretty much covers all the changes. I really just wanted to take some time to cross-compare and start predicting on what might be popular and how these changes will affect the class. My hope is to start testing this a little bit more on PTRs, especially in regards to the Punishment talent. I also want to keep an eye on the Lightforged Blessing because if it is changed to Shield of the Righteous, it might be a strong contender. I also want to test out Fading Light accompanied with Seal of Appraisal. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about these changes in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and a massive shout out to all my Patreon supporters because without them, there would be much less of this. So thank you guys. I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.